One of the biggest issues, it seems to be, when you watch that whole Republican circus show up there, and when you listen to Donald Trump, he said this, and the number one problem which he's going to fix is, guess what?
If you're elected president again, what's your number one priority? When you ran last time, you said, I will build a wall. This time, your bottom line top promise to the country.
So you can do numerous things at the same time.
Of course.
But let's say number one is a border. And taking hundreds of thousands of criminals that have been allowed into our country and getting them out and bringing them back to their country.
Let's start with Gerald on this one. Gerald, I went to the movie premiere of RFK's 18-minute documentary, Midnight at the Border. Now, it appeared to me that he was making a pitch to a conservative base out there in which he can probably get some votes from by saying he was going to close down the border. He did it in a very Kennedy-esque way where it was very, it's a humane thing to do because these people are getting taken advantage of the of the cartels and whatnot. But I flipped the conversation around to saying, what was the actual cause of migration? Donald Trump is very kind of, he's really tied into his base. He understands what they want. Why do so many Americans look at what happens at the border and rather than looking at the cause of migration, which is 800 military bases around the world? In Latin America, there's 82 of them. It's not bases over there. It's an occupation. I go down there. I talk to these people. The number one thing that they all want, whether they're conservatives or liberals, is they want national sovereignty. They want the Americans out. They want the right to say what they can do with their resources. They want the right to choose whatever monetary system they want instead of the Americans in there causing destabilization so we can extract our resources for pennies on the dollar. When are people going to wake up to this, Gerald? Because even Donald Trump is doing the same thing when he's not recognizing what's going on when it comes to migration. It's because of the wars and occupation. Go ahead.
Look, he did a great job in Venezuela, didn't he?
Oh, my Lord.
Forgot about that one. We want Maduro out of there. And they
try to whack him.
Like Guaido in there, a little clown, and him and all of the NATO countries said that he was the real president, Guaido. What's a Guaido? What, did he disappear? Look what he did to Venezuela.
Did you see
Look
it?
what he did to it.
Oh, did you see the video of him?
Yeah, when they were ripping his shirt, you're talking about.
He's living in Venezuela.
Yeah.
I would have thought people who say they're the rightful ruler of Cuba or whatever can't go back to Cuba.
Well, Cuba's different than Venezuela. Venezuela, the bourgeoisie, the ruling classes, the elites live there, but yeah, it's a whole different situation.
So I didn't even realize he lived in Venezuela. Aaron showed the video, and just regular people are just attacking him in a restaurant.
They started ripping his shirt off. But go ahead, Gerald. I'm sorry.
Like going back to it, it's when you said, why don't the people get it? Once upon a time, there's a book written by General Smedley Butler, the most decorated Marine in history. And you know it because when we were at the Rage Against the War Machine rally, you read excerpts of it about how he doesn't want to work for the banksters anymore. And the groups they're taking over Haiti in one country after another. So this has been going on forever. And it was United Fruit and on and on and on. Look what they did to Guatemala, one country after another. So America's caused this destruction, as well as the Europeans that intervened and went over there.
Judge, your thoughts on this, because, you know, I mean, you have some libertarian roots, I believe, and they are very non-interventionist. They're not for regime change. They would rather us pull back and say, let's worry about our own problems at home. Let's not worry about what's going on in these other countries. And I would also say, too, as well, the same people who are screwing us over here, whether it be the Gates or the Bezos, they're the same people. Gerald mentioned the UFC with the United Fruit Company, which eventually split off to become Dole and Chiquita, and we invaded a country over a banana. What are your thoughts on this, Judge Knapp? How do we get this across to people to wake up that if you don't want migration, you don't want people coming here, then we got to get out where we're at over there?
Well, I agree with everything you've just said and everything Gerald said. To me, there are two sides to this coin. One side is the perpetual wars and the perpetual occupation and the turning these countries into vassal states, which is the argument you and Gerald have made. The other argument is that we have become a welfare society over here, we take from the haves and give to the have-nots. And so there's an incentive for have-nots to come here because they know that the basics are going to be taken care of by the government, because we have a government here that has assumed responsibility for these people. If we didn't live in a welfare state, people would only come here when there are jobs available for them. They wouldn't come here to get the freebies that the government gives away. And of course, nothing's for free. They either create it out of thin air by borrowing against the future, or they tax the daylights out of the rest of us. How will this change? I don't know that's going to change in any of our lifetimes. It will change when the federal government collapses of its own weight, or if some sort of a miracle happens and 2/3 of the Congress and the White House start thinking like Ron Paul, then the government will shrink down to the confines of the Constitution. The 800, 900, nobody even knows what the true number is, American military bases we have around the world, all will be shuttered. There will be no wars unless it's a defensive war. I happen to think the last moral war we fought was started in 1776 and ended in 1783. And every single war since then has been a war of opportunity for whatever, I'll use Gerald's phrase, banksters or tricksters needed to further the military-industrial complex at the time. I regret that I have to go because I have another commitment which starts in about 3 or 4 minutes.
Let me ask you one question, Judge Knapp.
And we have to do it again.
One question before you go, because there's one part I want to push back on over there, and then we'll get to Gerald's opinion really quickly. But is it really fair to say that since we have the haves and the have-nots, that the people who do come over here, they initially come here, the majority of them come is because we're in their country? Is it really fair to say that they do come here because they're getting free stuff when initially they came here because we're in their country? I mean, I was in Honduras. There are 4 military bases. One of them has 1,500 American troops. And as we know, Hillary Clinton, when she was the Secretary of State, removed Manuel Zelaya from that country, turning that country, Honduras, into chaos. And you even mentioned that there's 84 or something regime changes. Is it really fair to point to the social welfare state as a reason they're coming, as opposed
there's
to...
there's probably no one reason, just like there's rarely one reason that any of us does anything. But we'd have far fewer people trying to get in here if we didn't have the welfare state. The world has changed so much. When Gerald's grandparents came over, and yours and mine, they really were looking for a better life. They didn't insist that the laws or the schools or the churches or the culture adapt to them. They adapted to it, and they worked hard. And each generation of them, I'm 3rd generation, had education and life and experiences that the previous generations didn't have. Not because the government intervened, not because the government gave anything away, but because they were raised up on the work ethic. Today, where the government takes from the haves and gives to the have-nots, you don't need the work ethic. All you need to do is get your toe in the water or your foot across the border.
Yeah. Well, this seems like a conversation we can continue over Sanka and Entenmann's another time. But let's get Gerald's closing thought. Judge Napolitano, thank you so much for joining us today. You want to let everybody know where they can find you, and we'll get Gerald's closing statement?
Well, they can get me at Judging Freedom on YouTube, where I've become the go-to place for the side of American foreign policy, which you won't get from the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or the Washington Post, or even from my former employers of 24 years, Fox News. You'll get it from the Trends Journal, and you'll get it at Judging Freedom on YouTube.
And he's got the best hair in the business. Thank you so much, Judge Knapp. Gerald, close out and let's put a bow on this section. Anything you got to say about what we just talked about?
Yeah, well, first of all, this Judging Freedom channel, by the way, is sensational. The people he's bringing on there, like Douglas McGregor and Scott Ritter and others, that are really giving another side. And I want to make this clear, by the way. I'm totally opposed to Russia's invasion, but I totally understand why it happened. So I want to make that clear. And we also said right at the very beginning that there's no way that Ukraine's going to win. You got to be really stupid to think that the Russians, who lost some 25 million people in World War II under Operation Barbarossa by Hitler, was going to be defeated when they were the first ones to defeat the Germans. And Napoleon's march to Moscow in 1812 leaves Poland with 420,000 troops, comes back with 10,000. But going back now to what this immigration, tracking trends is an understanding of where we are and how we got here to see where we're going. Again, being paisanos, I remember as a kid, I used to hear my parents, may they rest in peace, talking about cousin Constantino. And they wanted to bring him in from Italy. And they were having a lot of problems getting him in here because the immigration restrictions were so tight. They didn't begin to change until the Vietnam War. And again, I was prime Vietnam War meat. I'm born in 1946. What they did after that murderous piece of low-life scum crap, LBJ, LB Jerkoff, started the war after they assassinated John F. Kennedy. That's when they changed the immigration policies. They needed to bring in more men because they were taking all the young men out of the country. Number two, again, I wrote about it in my book, where it is over here, Trends 2000. The H-1B visas. When the whole internet revolution began to happen, they needed cheap labor coming in from India and other countries for the technology. And they changed the visa laws to bring in cheap labor so they wouldn't have to pay Americans a lot of money as the internet revolution was going on in the 1990s. So that's what happened. And then they just did away with it all. That these people are flooding into this country, to me, is a disgrace. I don't want my money going to them. You better stay in your country and you people figure it out over there and you fight back to what's going on, not my trip. I want to make it clear. So that's the way I feel about it. And Trump is full of crap. He did nothing to build a wall before. Why would anybody swallow is going to stop immigration crap again? Again, my magazine, here it is. He gets elected. Crusader Trump. We were the first ones to call him a winner in 2016 when everybody said he'd lose. He had two lies out of three that he said he was going to do. Number one was stop the inflow of the refugees coming into the country. Number two, anybody can look this up, so you know it's not coming from me. Number two, fix our third world rotted infrastructure. Oh yeah, Trump lives in New York. He never took the subway anymore, not in Calcutta. And number three, he was going to cut taxes. The only thing he did was cut taxes. And you know what he cut taxes for?
Rich.
According to the Tax Policy Center, the 1% got 64% of the tax cuts. That's all he did. And the next year, and the BS that spewed out of his mouth, we're going to cut these taxes to the big corporations so they have capital expenditures and they're going to build up the economy and they're going to build up the businesses. All they did was stock buybacks that hit $1 trillion the next year. Yeah. The rich just got richer. And that's all Trump's about, man. It's only about him. We're the same age. We're the same age. When I was a little kid, the biggest threat my parents would give me and my brothers every time we get out of line, you little bastards, we had enough of your crap, we're sending you to military school. That was the greatest threat. Trump was so narcissistic that they sent him to military school just about 45 minutes south of me over here in Cornwall, New York, in the middle of nowhere. So here you are as a teenager. What are you thinking about? I'm thinking about girls, cars, sports, and my mother, great cook. And now I'm in military school in this stupid drag eating crap food and not being able to do anything. He's only interested in himself. He's a narcissist.
Hey, come see us on Live on Tour. We're doing a show in New York City, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Stamford, Connecticut, Toledo, Rochester, Michigan. That's just outside of Detroit. St. Louis, Tampa, Florida, Boca Raton, Florida, and Orlando, Florida. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all those tickets.